Welcome to Bayou Time. I'm Jacob DeGate, and I'm now joined by Trooper Ross Brennan with the Louisiana State Police. Thank you very much for joining us. Talking a little bit about, I guess, something that's not pleasant to talk about, but unfortunately, it's been getting a lot of attention in the news. What happened in Buffalo and what happened in Texas not too long ago, dealing with active shooter
Yeah.
situations, and uh, it's something that's unpleasant, and it's unfortunate that we have to deal with it, or something to think about. But it's always good to be prepared.
Yeah. I know Chief Zarang and Chief Alex Barnes with Nichols and also a captain with Thibodeau. They were on yesterday talking about the law enforcement aspect, about what they typically do whenever an active shooter in the training. I would like to kind of give some tips on the civilian, the citizen, if they find themselves in a situation where maybe they're at a business or at a place of work or something, and an incident like this goes down. Basically, an active shooter is anybody who is actively trying to hurt or harm people with a firearm. A lot of times, these individuals, they choose what we call soft targets, places that have limited security. So that might be a mall, a shopping center, maybe a place of business or work. Every now and then, of course, we've seen lately with the school, but it's typically things where people aren't expecting stuff like that to happen. Maybe there's not a whole lot of police presence around there. Unfortunately, we are grateful and thankful that our area down here, we don't see stuff like this, but it's always good to be prepared. You never knew, or you never do know when something like this could happen. And when you do find yourself in these situations, you have to make a split-second decision to save your life and also your family's life if they're with you. And basically, it boils down to three things: run, hide, and fight. Right? Those, and we're going to break them down a little bit more. But those three things is what a citizen can do if they do find themselves in a situation. So let's start off with run. You're in a shopping mall or a business and you hear shots fired coming out. What you should do from that point, if you can safely, get out the building. Find the nearest fire exit or a door or some type of way to get out of the building. Encourage other people to also leave the building with you. If they're hesitant, though, don't wait for them. I mean, ultimately, you're trying to save your life. If somebody doesn't want to leave, if they're scared, this kind of sounds bad to say, but leave them behind because you got to get yourself to safety. Once you are outside, find a safe place to go to. Call 911, and also don't let other people go into the building. Warn them also. That way nobody else can fall victim in that type of situation. So if you can't get out the building, try to do that first. There's some situations where you're not able to get out of the building fast enough. Maybe you're on a multi-story building and it's happening on the first floor, something like that. At that point, it kind of goes into hide. So you have to find a certain place inside that facility that you can go and try to be out of the shooter's viewpoint, whether that's a closet or a room or somewhere that you can go into. Turn off the lights, all right, and try to either lock the door or block the door with heavy objects, whether that's a heavy desk or a refrigerator, if it's a break room, something you can put behind that door to stop it from going in. Because a lot of times these shooters, they're kind of just going through as fast as they can to see who they can hurt. If they got to kind of work to get into a room, they're typically going to pass it up and go on to the next one. So whatever you can do to kind of block that door. Like I said, turn off the lights, be quiet in there, make sure nobody's crying or screaming. Turn off that cell phones because you want to stay as quiet as possible.
Sure, and that's a thing with if there's an active shooter situation and word gets out,
Yeah.
people are probably going to try to reach you to see if you're safe. And if you have that phone, if you didn't turn it
Yeah.
on silent or turn it off the vibrate, that's something that could certainly them draw their attention to.
Yeah, and this whole thing about trying to be quiet and hidden. Another thing too is that while you're inside that room, try to hide behind an object that might be able to stop, somebody firing a gun. Well, like I said, a heavy desk or a refrigerator, a stove, filing cabinet, something you can hide behind. One that kind of conceals you if there's maybe a window to that door. But also think about something that can maybe stop a gun or a weapon if it's being fired in there. Like I said, just kind of you just want to hide and be safe. And just kind of wait. Don't, if you can move after the threat's kind of going through the area, if you can move to a safer spot, do so. So you don't, another thing too, whenever you're hiding, you don't want to hide in a place that can limit your movement. You still want to be able to be free to move around. So you don't want to kind of be stuck in the corner or stuck, in a certain spot where if you do have to move, you can't do that. Like I said, these are split-second decisions you have to make, and sometimes we're not always in the best positions, but you kind of got to decide real quick on what you want to do in that environment.
Sure, and then I guess the next point is if you do find yourself in that bad situation where you can't get out of there, you can't leave.
Yeah.
and you know that you're going to be found. If he's going around checking all the areas, you know that he's going to find you. What's the next step at that point?
The last one's fight, okay? And look, what we mean by fight is improvised weapons, right? Whether it's a broomstick, a pipe, fire extinguisher, a chair. If you know that you can't hide, you can't get out of the room, you got to make the decision that you're going to have to incapacitate this person, and you want to try to hurt them. If they're out there trying to hurt you, you want to hurt them or even worse. So whatever you have to do to save your life and the other people that might be around you, do what you got to do, because ultimately, like I said, you want to make sure that you go home, especially in this type of situation. So try to come up real quick. Maybe if there's multiple people in the room, a game plan. Hey, you grab this thing. I'm going to grab this chair. Somebody else is going to grab a fire extinguisher. As soon as this person comes in, this is what we're going to do. Basically jump and attack them. Like I said, you kind of got to commit to it. I know a lot of people don't like to think about this, but understand these type of situations, it could be kind of life or death. So if you find yourself, unfortunately, you have to commit to it. And that's what's part of the fight of it. Try to get out of there.
Yeah, and I imagine one of the worst things you can do is if you do make that decision and fight, and you kind of hesitate and you're worried about hitting them, or you're worried about what the effects will be. It's something that you really got to commit and go for.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, kind of those three things: run, hide, fight. Never want to see anybody ever have to be in this position to make those decisions. But the world that we do live in, you never know what could happen. So
what's the next step when police do arrive on scene and are still in the active shooter scenario?
Yeah. So we're receiving a ton of information, whether it's from people outside the building, people inside the building. So whenever police first show up, we're just trying to first stop whatever's causing the threat, right? Stop that shooter. So, we're going to try to enter that building, and the primary goal of those first officers going into that building is to stop that threat. So there might be people injured or even worse on the road or inside the hallways or rooms. Those first officers, they're going to pass them up because we want to prevent other people from getting hurt or injured. And it's all just about neutralizing that threat. And whenever that person who is shooting is finally, if they're taken out or arrested or whatever, at that point, then we'll start to triage and look for injured people and things like that. But there's going to be a lot of confusion kind of those first few seconds in there, because we don't know who's a victim. We don't know who's the actual shooter. You can have a shooter who hid the guns, and now he's acting like he's a victim. So probably after it first happens, everybody's going to be treated almost like a suspect. They're going to pat you down, make sure your hands are up. Just make sure that you listen to what the police are saying. Make sure your hands are visible. Put your hands up. Like I said, we don't know who's dangerous and who's not dangerous. Make sure you put your hands up, listen to instructions. Don't scream or yell or point or make any type of crazy movements. Just listen to the police, and they'll try to direct you out of there, make sure that you are safe, things like that. Another thing too is that another way that you can kind of prevent yourself from even getting into some of these situations is also just trying to be aware of your surroundings. So let's say you're out in a store or out in the mall or whatever. Just take a few seconds to think about, okay, if something does go down, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to like the back of the store? Do I know that there's an exit back there? Like I said, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it is kind of the world that we live in nowadays. I know me, whenever I'm out in public, I try to think about exits and, if something happens. But just having that situational awareness of what can happen. Also, just look for people who are kind of odd. If something doesn't seem right, there's probably a good reason it's not right. So just kind of trust your gut sometimes. And again, if you see something, say something. If you know this family member or a friend or something, if they start displaying some traits that aren't normal, that you think might be kind of dangerous or, whatever, like a lot of these shooters, looking back, they kind of had the telltale signs of something was about to go down, but nobody said anything. Police can't be everywhere. A lot of times family members, relatives, friends, they're kind of the first, to see some of the warning signs. Look, like I said, if you see something, say something, contact your local police. I'd rather not be anything than it be something and nothing kind of gets done about it. But as far as state police, we train for active shooter situation. I know we're not in the schools, we're not the SROs and things like that. But, if something does happen like that, they'll put the all call basically out for departments. We'll try to get out there. But we do active shooter training. In fact, part of our yearly training that we all go through as the whole department, we had active shooter training going and clearing buildings and things like that. So we're definitely well prepared. And that's every trooper. That's not just our SWAT teams and stuff like that. That's every trooper has that training to go through. buildings.
Well, you saw in Texas, you wouldn't think that a border patrol would have that training, but that was one the main things that were able to eventually, enter the classroom and stop it was the border patrol. They didn't wait for anybody else. They went ahead based on their own training.
Yeah.
So that's something that y'all do as well.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to know out there.
And it's kind of weird because every state, every department has different training. So we can kind of look at it through our lens over here, but we don't, that's a whole different state, a whole other department, and we don't exactly know what their protocols were and things like that. But I just said, with us state police, like I said, we do have active shooter training, and if, rounds are going off, I mean, we're supposed to go into that building and try to find whoever's doing it, and try to stop them.
And again, you mentioned earlier, I guess your training, it calls for you to not immediately render aid. That's one thing that you have to do. It's not that you don't care, but that's the most important thing is to stop that threat from hurting anybody else.
Yeah.
And then the next step is able to come in there
Yeah.
and assist all those people.
Yeah. Once it's safe, then we can see about getting, medical people in there. Because a lot of time, other first responders, they're not going to be able to go into the building until, the scene's completely safe. A lot of times, like fire, Acadian, they might stage down the road because they're waiting for us to give the all clear for them to come in and render aid. So like I said, those first few minutes after, it can be kind of crazy and confusion, but we have a plan. We know what we're doing. There's a method to the madness in a sense. So that's the whole goal of that.
Okay. Now, I guess is there any one, I guess, important tip out there, or what's the most important thing if you ever do find yourself in that situation?
Yeah.
Is it don't panic? Is it be quiet? Or what do you think is the most important?
And look, I completely understand, talking about it's one thing in a real situation, it's game on, that's real life. Look, just try to keep your wits. Don't panic. Don't freak out. And just remember, like we talked about, run, hide, fight. Make a decision. Are you going to get out that building? Are you going to stay in there? Where you're going to hide? And if you can't find any place, what you're going to do if you are confronted with this person? It's no choice that anybody wants to make, but maybe someday you might find yourself where you have to, and it's always good to kind of think about it now rather than later on and you don't have a plan.
Well, we certainly thank you for coming on, and we hope that any of the viewers out there, never find yourself in a situation that may have to deal with it, but hopefully tips that Trooper Brennan gave you will help maybe save your life or save somebody else's life if you ever find yourself in that unfortunate event. But thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more right here on HTV.